When he escaped the canyon, at the bottom of the rappel that afternoon was the water that he so desperately needed, but it was rancid and stagnant. Floating in it, a dead raven. Was it yet another sign that Ralston would triumph over death?
I drank about 3 liters just sitting here over the course of about 15 minutes. First just a little sip at a time, and then taking big gulps. And I filled my water bottles up again. I emptied some things out of my backpack, and I stood up and got ready to go.
And yet again, one more seemingly impossible task. With one arm, bleeding profusely, starved and dehydrated, now close to shock, Ralston would have to hike 7 miles out of the canyon in the direct midday sun. Then an 800-foot vertical climb to the trailhead and his truck. The nearest hospital was a several-hour drive. As he set out, his desperate struggle to survive was still far from over. As Aron Ralston summoned his strength to the 7-mile hike that lay ahead, rescuers were converging near his truck at the Horseshoe Canyon trailhead.
I honestly thought to myself that we was actually on a recovery more than a rescue because of the amount of time that had passed.
Sergeant Mitch Viteri of the Emery County Sheriff's Office was joined by helicopter pilot Terry Mercer with Utah's Department of Public Safety, both seasoned veterans of search and rescue operations. Within minutes, they were airborne, trying to locate Ralston, an extremely difficult task in the vast expanse of the desert scrub, where a human being can be almost impossible to spot.
As a search and rescuer, I've got to think there's a chance. You got to keep positive about it. But I would say probably 30–40% of the people we come out here looking for, we end up carrying back in the body bag.
Miles away on the other side of the canyon, Ralston labored to make his way across the loose sand, the afternoon sun sapping his strength.
I was losing blood, I hadn't slept, I was fatigued, my body was just exhausted from the effort of staying alive over the course of those 5–6 days, and it was getting harder and harder even just to walk, even at a slow pace.
He would later learn that he had lost 25% of his blood supply. He was on the verge of decompensatory shock, when the body can no longer provide oxygen to vital organs and shuts down. Despite his miraculous self-rescue, Ralston was now literally once again on the verge of death. Luckily, he was about to get help from an unlikely source. Eric and Monique Meyer, along with their 11-year-old son Andy, had traveled some 5,000 miles from their home in the Netherlands to experience the beauty of the American Canyonlands.
I came around a corner and saw them hiking. I shouted to them,
"Help, help.
Help, help, I need help." And we saw a man covered with blood.
and they came running back, and I started telling them,
I just had to cut off my arm a few hours ago. I need help, I need medical attention, I need a helicopter.
The Meyers gave him everything they had, 2 Oreos and some water. Then mother and son ran ahead for help. Eric stayed behind to help Aron walk. But Aron was fading quickly now.
I wasn't able to hike without keeping water in my mouth. I was so dehydrated that breathing at a rapid rate it parched me.
After 2 more arduous hours of hiking, finally, Ralston saw the trail in the distance where his truck was parked. But his heart sank.
I was looking up an 800-foot, very steep hillside in direct sun, no shade, loose, sandy terrain, in 85 to 90 degree heat. It was going to be my death to try to hike out of there. Just at that time was when we heard the and the helicopter appeared, coming up the canyon, and it was deliverance.
It was hallelujah.
Yeah, it was every cliche I could think of. It was the cavalry coming, and it was an angel from heaven, and it was my life. And I knew when I saw it, I'd made it.
Mercer and Viteri, having searched unsuccessfully for hours now, were preparing to turn around to refuel when suddenly they saw movement on the ground.
It was amazing to see somebody still standing and walking that was in the type of condition he was in.
He says, "I've cut off my arm. Can I have a ride?" I mean, he even asked for a ride.
Within a few seconds, the engines were full speed, rotors are going full blast, and we start lifting up off the ground, and then the horizon. All of a sudden, we come out of the canyon, and I can see further than the lip of the canyon for the first time in 6 days, and it was my final re-entry to my life, to the salvation that I needed.
In Denver, Donna Ralston got the call that she had been praying for.
It was like everything drained out of me, and it was complete relief and thankfulness that he had been found.
He was rushed to the hospital in Grand Junction, Colorado, where he underwent surgery on his arm. After coming to, Aron was reunited with his mother.
The first thing I thought was, oh my God, I'm alive. And when my mom came in the room, we both cried together. I've never been happier to see anybody in my life.
It was a wonderful sight. I just kind of stood there in disbelief and looked at him and leaned down and kissed him and said, "Aron, I'm here." First thing he said was, "Can I have food?" And I think he didn't stop eating the whole time he was in the intensive care unit.
He was safe. Against all odds, he had rescued himself. He was reunited with his family, reborn. But for Aron, a second chance did not mean his old life was over. Aron Ralston's story stunned the world. It was front-page news around the globe. I remember when the news hit. I had an email from my daughter, who's an emergency room doctor and a climber, and had one word, "Oh my God," she said. I think that was the reaction of everyone everywhere. But for you, it was about so much more than that. It was, as you said, a rebirth, a spiritual experience.
It was very spiritual, and the fact that I cut off my arm was a part of that for sure. There's a positive side to it. When people come up to me to say, "You're an inspiration, your story is amazing, I heard about what you did," that what they're telling me is that I've affected them. I've done something that helped them in some way.
But his recovery was far from easy. There was serious damage to the bones and tissue in his arm. There were 5 surgeries, a life-threatening bone infection. He required intravenous antibiotics for months. He'd lost more than 40 pounds and suffered from chronic pain. But more intense sometimes was the phantom pain, his shocked nerve endings sending false signals from a part of the arm that was no longer there. Despite it all, Aron Ralston really did feel lucky just to be alive.
I'm not sure if I can really convey the grief and the realizations that I'd gone through in the canyon to understand that I was going to die there. But understanding that, everything else was absolute bonus. I was getting every proverbial second chance in the book.
His sister Sonia's wedding, that he thought he wouldn't live to see, was a joyous event.
To be at my sister's wedding, to be back with my family, to see my relatives, to see my friends, to be out doing all the things that I loved again, and eventually, even with time, all of that came to pass.
For any amputee, learning to adjust to life with a prosthesis is a struggle. Getting dressed and tying a shoe with one hand, the left hand no less. For Ralston, well, it's slightly more complicated than that. His everyday tasks range from scaling a 200-foot ice gorge to competing in a multi-sport adventure race, pursuits that he tackled with characteristic intensity the moment he was able to. Within months of the accident, he was testing himself again back in Jackson, Wyoming to climb Mount Moran and Grand Teton, a triumphant return.
Take it easy on me. All right.
More than a year later, Ralston is back on top of his world with the help of some additional hardware. He has an array of specially modified prosthetic devices. He can clamp on to his mountain bike or click into a ski pole, alpine or cross country, rock climbing and ice climbing. It may even be an advantage to have the pick as an extension of your own arm.
Oh, yeah.
So far, no more close calls for Aron Ralston, but eventually will he find himself in a situation again where his life is at stake? Of that, there seems to be no doubt.
You've had enough epics for a while.
I think that would be a fair assessment.
Adventurers call them epics, a battle of wills between man and nature, when man lives to tell the tale. One hopes this epic will be his last. Days after Ralston rescued himself, park rangers returned to Blue John Canyon to retrieve his arm. It took 13 men, a winch, and a hydraulic jack to pry what was left of his arm from under that rock. It was cremated. He carried the ashes with him in a box on our journey back to Blue John. Before leaving, Aron asked for a moment to be alone, to scatter his ashes back where he says they belong. He rubbed out the final epitaph that he'd carved into the canyon walls. He is finally at peace with what happened here. As he says, he is reborn. There is another reason Aron picked this day for our return to the canyon. It was the 6-month anniversary of his accident, but also his birthday, his 28th. But really, he says, his first. In the end, Ralston says the epic of Blue John Canyon is a battle he'd rather have fought and won than to have never waged at all.
When you were in that canyon, your arm trapped by the boulder, you were facing death every day. It was the worst ordeal of your life, but in some ways, it's the richest experience of your life because of how it's changed everything.
My perspective certainly changed among those things. The appreciation I have for my life now, for my friends, my family, the experiences I get to enjoy. Getting back out and climbing these things, I appreciate them, and they feel so much richer to me now. And I think that for that, I wouldn't trade the experience I had in that canyon for anything. It was 6 days that has shaped and will shape the rest of my life.
And that life still includes a full schedule of climbing. Aron Ralston remains committed to solo climbing all of Colorado's 14,000-foot peaks in the winter. So far, he's conquered 47 out of his list of 59. But he's not spending all of his time climbing. As we mentioned, Ralston has written a book about his experience. To read an excerpt of Between a Rock and a Hard Place, log on to our website. The address is msnbc.com. I'm Tom Brokaw. Good night.